So I was talking about, some of the pros and cons for deciding to sell wholesale, either in addition to your retail sales or, in replacement of. And so one of those things that's kind of a positive is that your sales as a wholesaler are going to be a little more predictable. You're going to have orders ahead of time. You're going to know how many things people are ordering, and so it's a little bit more kind of unknown ahead of time, as opposed to retail where, you may have busier times of the year that you know you're going to be busier, but from day to day or maybe week to week, there could be a big fluctuation in sales. And so it's harder to prepare for that, knowing how much inventory you need and knowing maybe how much staffing you need. And so that's one thing that some people like about wholesaling. The other thing that's kind of a positive with wholesaling is that you're really only needing to produce the items that you sell. If you're working, on an order basis, which a lot of the time you're going to be, you don't have a lot of excess inventory. So that means there's fewer markdowns, not a lot of waste. If someone places an order for 100 candles, you know you need to make 100 candles and that they're sold and they're paid for. So that makes things a little bit more manageable. The other really nice thing about wholesaling is it allows you to get your product in front of a larger audience than you maybe would be able to reach as an individual person. And so, you may be selling things at shows. I'm sure a lot of you have done the show circuit and have been going around doing shows or maybe pop-up shops or maybe, have an online presence or do farmers markets. You spread yourself pretty thin doing that, and you know how much work it is and how much time is involved. And as a wholesaler, you're able to actually reach a lot more people through your retailers and getting into some markets maybe that you wouldn't have been able to get to otherwise. And then there are some things to consider with wholesaling that maybe, mean that it's not for you or would make it more difficult for you. The biggest thing is that there are smaller profit margins. The idea with wholesale is that you sell more product at a smaller margin in order to make the same amount of profit. And so, depending on what type of product you have and how your production is, that may or may not be, possible for you. So you need to think about that, and you need to be really careful on pricing, which we're going to talk about tonight, to make sure that you're able to wholesale successfully. We can kind of get into a little bit of a deeper analysis or deeper questioning of if wholesale is really right for you. And I think there's probably, four main areas to take a look at when you're thinking about that. Pricing is one of those. Your production, your scheduling and your capabilities is another, if your product is saleable as a wholesale item, and also your branding and cohesiveness. So we'll talk about those things. And again, things to keep in mind as you're considering wholesale, or if you're new to wholesaling, making sure that you're making the best of it. So when you're thinking about pricing, you really need to consider if you can sell your products at a wholesale price that the retailer is going to want to pay, and that if ultimately your product will sell at the price that the retailer is going to charge. There are some fluctuations to this, but in most cases, retailers are probably going to double the wholesale price. That's a good place to start. We'll talk a little bit more about doing some market research. You'll gather more information and get more knowledgeable about this as you get into wholesaling and as you kind of research your potential markets. But if you take a look at, whatever the wholesale price would be for your product, and if you double that and you can't picture that, being on a retail store shelf and a customer buying it at that price, then you may have to, either adjust your pricing in some way, or think about, maybe wholesaling is not really the right market for you to be in. And again, there's people ask about pricing all of the time. When we work with clients here at the SBDC, pricing is always the question. If I could give you a magic formula that said, plug all this information in and you'll come up with your wholesale price and your retail price and you'll be good to go. But it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So if you do have questions about pricing, I'd encourage you to talk to somebody, either at ANCA or at the SBDC, and we will be giving you some contact information at the end of the slides about that. And you'll have my email as well when we follow up after the webinar. But thinking about your pricing and getting some help and kind of walking through how you're setting your pricing and considering all of that. You also need to consider your production and how that's going to work. One of those is, can you produce your product in volume? If you've got a product that's kind of customized or that's, one of a kind or really unique, it may be harder to do that. But you really need to think about, can I make 100 of these widgets or 200 or 500 or however many it might be in your particular industry, and if that's viable for you in terms of time, but also, is it cost effective? Is it financially feasible for you to produce in volume? So you need to think about things like, how long does it take to produce an item? If you have an item that takes many many hours to produce one of, maybe producing in volume is not going to work for you, or maybe you need to find a different method of production that speeds things up. And then when that happens, you have to think about, okay, am I compromising quality in some way? So there's a lot of things to balance. One thing that sometimes is a solution to these challenges is thinking about, if you can produce a smaller version of, one of your key products or some of your key pieces in your line, that are easier to produce in a larger quantity. And so something like that might be, I worked with a woodworker, actually a few woodworkers, a couple of them, that made like really nice wooden furniture and, custom shelving and some beautiful work. That was all, very, very high quality and nice stuff, but very time consuming to produce and therefore very expensive. So it was hard to get that into a retailer's hands. And what they did was do kind of smaller versions of their products, like maybe, smaller wooden boxes or soap dishes or key rings or something that still reflected their skill and, a really nice product, but that was something that could be produced a little bit more quickly. And again, these things may not fit for every business. You have to think about if it's right for you. I've talked to a candle maker that was looking at doing wholesale and had all different types of scents that she had available, and for her wholesale line she cut that down to like maybe four or five or six. So rather than offering her entire line for wholesale, maybe a select piece of that, that gave her a little more control over the production. A lot of times I talk with artists, painters or print artists or things like that, that say, well, how can I really wholesale this? And sometimes that's a little harder to wholesale an art piece, but sometimes you can wholesale prints or have greeting cards made or other products made with your art printed on them that maybe would be easier for you to wholesale. So a lot of this involves not only looking at your particular product line and thinking about how you could wholesale, but also looking at what are the needs of the retailer. How much, of this product are they going to want? Where is it going to be? How is it going to be displayed? Those kinds of things. And with that comes along with thinking about what those retailers are looking for. If there's an owner of a retail store, what is it that they want? How much space do they have? How much product do they want to carry? What's their budget for inventory? And what are they going to be shopping for? And we're going to talk, like I said, a little bit more about market analysis as we move along. But those are the kinds of things that you want to try to kind of make educated guesses about as you move ahead and, get familiar with some of the retailers you're dealing with. Another thing to think about is that sometimes it's a concern to have access to maybe materials or supplies for something that you do. If you're using, kind of a rare material or something that's, maybe limited by seasonality. Maybe there are certain times of the year when you can't get your hands on a certain product or a material or an ingredient in what you're doing. You want to think about that, if that's going to limit your ability to produce enough to make, retailers happy. Another thing to consider is shipping. How is your product going to be shipped to that retailer after they place an order? So is your product something that can ship pretty easily, or does it require a lot of special packaging? Does it kind of have uniform packaging so you can put a lot of them into a case or a crate? And if not, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't wholesale, but you might be thinking about restructuring your packaging or, how you're going to go about shipping things to make sure that they arrive at your retailer, first of all, efficiently, but then also, in one piece. You want things to arrive in good quality. Are shipping costs going to be reasonable? Do you have something that's maybe, particularly fragile, it's going to cost a little bit more to deliver, or something that's particularly heavy. So you want to kind of make those accommodations and think about, what products you have in your product line that could easily be shipped without a lot of hassle and a lot of risk. And then also thinking about, shipping schedules and your production schedule. How much can you produce and, also get out the door in a timely manner? So if you get an order for 1,000 pieces of something, how long is it going to take you to produce that? And then, when you add shipping time on top of that, is that going to be feasible? Are retailers going to be willing to wait that amount of time? Another thing to really kind of be mindful of as you're looking at wholesale is the saleability of your products. And so, there are a lot of people that I've talked to that have had the opportunity to sell wholesale. And I'm sure, a lot of you that aren't in it yet have been approached before about people that want to buy wholesale from you. And you really want to think long and hard and make sure you're prepared before you jump into that. Because just because someone is asking for you to sell something at wholesale doesn't necessarily mean that you should, or that there's a larger market than that out there. So think about, the items that are the most popular in your retail collection. What do you sell the most of? What are your customers looking for the most? And kind of try to stick to that core piece of your business. You also want to think about what pieces of your product line are going to be relatively easy for a retailer to have in their store and for them to display. Is it something that's going to take a lot of, special display materials or a special rack? And if it does, are you going to provide that? Will retailers have room for it? You really don't want to make a lot of extra work for the retailer. You want them to be able to get your product out on the shelves and start selling it as quickly and easy as possible. So again, these are some of the things that are going to kind of come about in your conversations with retailers and as you do market research and learn more about who you're targeting. And like I said, we'll talk about market research a little bit more, but just thinking about those kinds of things, and knowing that, even though there's an opportunity there, it may not always necessarily be the right opportunity. And so you also want to think about, keeping your brand cohesive as you start to go into wholesaling. If you've been in business for a while and you're doing a good retail business on your own, you've started to build your own brand, hopefully. You have an expectation from customers of what to expect when they're going to get your product, what level of quality, consistency. If I'm going to buy this candle, is it going to be the same scent every time? If I'm going to buy, this particular apparel item, is the color going to be the same every time? So those kinds of things. And are you able to kind of produce that consistency that people are going to be expecting? And then also thinking about, the parts of your product line that you're wholesaling, are they cohesive with your whole product line? Do they make sense? I've always tell my clients at the SBDC, just because there's an opportunity to do something doesn't mean that it's the right opportunity or that you should be doing it. So you really want to decide to wholesale more because it's part of your core business and there's the right market, but not necessarily because there's just an opportunity in front of you. And be careful that you're not being drawn away from your core business. If you're that candle maker, don't be drawn into maybe, making perfumes just because you've discovered that there might be a wholesale opportunity, unless that's something you were going to be getting into anyway. So moving on, the first few slides we're kind of talking about, okay, is wholesale right for me, and thinking about making that decision, and you know deciding if it's something that's right for you, and if you're going to go, kind of look into it more. Now we're going to start talking about, if once you decide that wholesale is the right direction for you to go, what are the things that you want to do to make sure that you're ready for that and to be able to make the most of your wholesale experience, and also, this upcoming show as well. So market research, I promised you that we'd talk about this, so we're going to. And really, this is another one of those things that there's no hard and fast rule about how to do this. I always think that market research is just kind of a search for information, an information gathering journey that you're going to take to figure out the answer to a question, and this question is, who's going to buy these products to sell in their stores or on their websites. And so there's a lot of ways to gather that kind of information. A good starting point, maybe to talk to someone at ANCA, if you've never been to the show before, to kind of get a little bit of background about the types of people, who are coming to represent retail stores and what they're looking for. That'll kind of give you some general overviews. But also, if I remember correctly, I believe that, you typically get a list of the attending retailers, or at least the ones who are pre-registered for this show ahead of time, so that you can at least get an idea of who those people are. If you get a chance to visit their retail locations or look at their websites or find out some information about them, that may help you to narrow down who your targets would be when you see them come through the show. Certainly talk to other people. Talk to, your current customers. Where do they typically shop? Where do they buy their products? Talk to other producers that produce, similar types of products. Don't steal their retail or their wholesale accounts, but if you talk to someone else that says, "Oh, I sell my soaps at this shop," having a good idea about that shop and what it's like and what kind of traffic it gets gives you a good idea of what to look for in another shop that might be similar in a similar location, similar market. You also want to think about what other producers or designers or creators do these various retail shops carry? Do they carry things that are similar to yours, or something kind of along the same lines? Is your product going to be relative to their customers? So if you're looking at a retail shop that carries maybe specialty kitchenware, and your wholesale product is keychains, not sure that that would be a perfect fit. But if your retail product is maybe, let's say, carved wooden utensils, that might be a good fit. So you really want to think about how your product would fit in that retail setting that you're targeting. And again, like I said before, the best way to get market information, to find out about your potential customers, in this case potential retail stores that would be buying your goods, is to visit as many as you can. I know that may not be possible between now and when the show is, but you may be able to get a few in. Check out their websites, look at their social media, maybe make some purchases from them to get a feel for their atmosphere, how they work. I think, like any piece of business, selling wholesale is, partially a relationship based sale. So you really want to have that rapport with whoever's selling your goods in their shop, to know you want them to be able to tell you, "Hey, I really think this would work better." And you want to be able to make suggestions to them to make that relationship work. Because when it does, it benefits you both. You're selling more of your product, they're selling more product in their store and making customers happier. Everybody makes money, everybody satisfies customers, and everybody's happy with that. So you just want to make sure that you kind of foster those relationships and try to develop those as early on as possible. Something to kind of keep in mind is looking for retailers that have, a high traffic volume. They have a lot of people coming in and out of their store, and that they move merchandise relatively quickly. If they have stuff that's sitting on their shelves collecting dust, that may not be the best option for you. And thinking about, also with their website, what kind of traffic does their website get? How many people are coming to their website to buy? How many people are buying through their social media outlets? All of those types of things, to find out if it's a good fit for you. Because again, one of those benefits of selling wholesale is you are really relying on these retail stores to make more sales for you. Because remember, the key here is volume. You need more sales to be able to make this, a doable venture, so that you have a smaller profit margin. You need to make more sales. Also, make sure that you're targeting retailers who are good at paying their vendors on time. And that's hard to know ahead of time. And we're going to talk about some ways that you can kind of address that. But one of those ways is to get some references, get some credit references from those retailers, some other, vendors who said, "Yeah, I've done business with this person and they've always paid on time and we've got a good relationship." Something to kind of be prepared for, sometimes this comes up, but not always, is you may run into a retailer who wants you to offer them exclusivity. They want to be the only person to carry your products either in their store or maybe, or I'm sorry, not in their store, obviously, but in their town or their county or a certain geographic area. You want to be careful before you agree to that to make sure that it's something that's going to be feasible for you. Is it possible for you to do that and still, be able to, sell the volume that you want to sell? A lot of that is really going to depend on where that retailer is located and what the larger retail landscape is like. So, it may be feasible to offer exclusivity to a retailer in a mall, but maybe it wouldn't be feasible to offer an exclusive to maybe a shop that's in a highly trafficked tourist area where, there's a lot of stores in a close proximity and a lot of people walking by, so that there's a chance that, people may see your products in two or three different stores depending on where they're traveling. So you just really need to think about that before you agree to it too quickly. So we'll talk about pricing a little bit. Pricing for wholesale is something that you want to take a really close look at. And not that, pricing is not important when you're selling your retail products. It is important, but it's even more important when you're selling wholesale because your margins are slimmer. And if you make a mistake or you miscalculate something or you've underpriced, it can hurt a lot more than when you do that at retail. So here are kind of the basic components of, pricing for wholesale. It's just the same as it is for pricing at retail. It's just that you kind of have to think about what happens after the product leaves your hands. So there's your cost of goods, your labor, your overhead, and your profit. And those are, you think about those a little bit differently when you're selling wholesale. So your cost of goods is the same. When you're selling at retail, your cost of goods is, your materials, your supplies, anything that you use to produce the end product. And you really want to make sure that you're getting the best possible pricing on all of those components, and that you're able to kind of keep those costs under control, and also continuing to be aware of those costs as your business progresses, because some of those costs may change and you want to be able to make adjustments. Labor is another part of that pricing. And you really want to make sure that you value your own labor, especially if you're a really small producer. You want to make sure that you're counting your own time. So, in talking about labor, you really want to make sure that you're valuing your own time. I think that's something that a lot of small producers and independent business people don't do. And there's some really important reasons to do that. Number one is, you want to make sure that you're paying yourself, and that you're paying yourself what you're worth. Sometimes it's a hard struggle because it results in a higher price maybe than what you think you'd like to sell your product at, but it's important, because if you're not being paid, then what's the point of all this? Also thinking about, as your business grows, you may need to outsource labor, or you may need to, pay for manufacturing for certain pieces of what you're doing, or maybe you're doing that now, but make sure that you include those costs as well, even if you're not necessarily doing those now, because as your business grows, you want to make sure that those costs are accounted for, so you don't, all of a sudden have a big, jump in pricing because you changed your process and labor. You also want to be thinking about your overhead costs, and making sure that you're getting enough out of your price to cover your operating expenses. Both fixed costs and variable costs, things that cost the same every month, like maybe rent, or maybe your insurance, and your variable costs, things that may go up and down depending on, the time of year, or, how much you're selling, marketing, travel, all of those types of things. And I have a couple of examples of kind of how you can do that. And again, there's not a real, set in stone formula that I can give you all to say, plug these numbers in here and voila, your magic price will be calculated. So really, you want to sit down with somebody and kind of go through your pricing and get that all figured out. And we're happy to help with that here at the SBDC. And so then the all important, last component of your pricing is profit. That's, basically once you've paid for everything, you've paid for your materials, you've paid yourself, or whatever labor goes into this product, you've covered your overhead. what's left over is profit, and that's what allows you to reinvest in your business and have it grow. It provides your cash cushion as your business expands and needs more cash, for things that maybe you didn't expect. And sometimes that allows you to supplement your income a little bit too. So you want to make sure that that profit component is where it needs to be for your business to be successful and for you to get everything that you need from your business as well. Just some other things to kind of keep in mind. You want to, so not just the hard numbers that go into the pricing, but then there's also these kind of more nuanced things that happen. Things like thinking about what price the market will support. So, if you have this product and you've sat down and you've looked at it and the price is going to be, X number of dollars, will consumers pay for that? Will retailers pay the wholesale price that you're going to have to charge? And then will consumers on the other end pay for it? So you have to really kind of get a feel for what the market will bear. Part of that is by looking at other products that are out there and what people are paying for other things, and really kind of comparing what you have and comparing what they have, both in terms of quality and just the longevity of the product, and your image. Image is a really important part of pricing, I think, that a lot of people forget about. And so, you really need to keep in mind how consumers relate price to quality. And typically, if consumers see a low price, they're expecting a low level of quality. They're not expecting something that's going to last for a long time. They're expecting something that they're going to have to, maybe make repeat purchases of. If they see a high price or maybe higher than average, what they're expecting is that they would have a higher level of quality, something that was going to, have a longer lifestyle, something that is going to, be made of quality products, have an overall, better performance. And then there's this tricky little spot in the middle, what's called value pricing, and that's, providing something at a fair price. It may not be the highest price in the market, but that still has a level of quality that people feel, is fair. And so you have to be careful of this, because sometimes when I talk to people about these different images that are related with different pricing levels, people say, well, I'll just charge more for my product. And people will say, oh, that's a great product, and they'll pay for it. If you're pricing your product as a high quality product, that has to hold up. So you can't just take something that's, mediocre quality and slap a high price on it and tell people that, yeah, this is great, and everyone's gonna just buy it at the higher price. Because consumers are pretty smart, and they know if I'm paying a higher price for this and it's not the level of quality that I expect to match that price, you're either going to have something returned, or you're going to get bad reviews, or you're not going to get that repeat sale, and so it's going to be short-lived. And then, as a wholesaler, the thing you have to add on top of all of that is thinking about, what are the retailers' needs? How much do they need to make off of this particular product? And again, a good rule of thumb, and again, there are some, fluctuations to that, is keystone pricing, where the retailer typically doubles the price. Again, this is where that market research comes in, and knowing your particular product and your industry, if it varies from that, in some ways. And so I do have a sample of a couple of pricing tools that I'm going to open for you. And these are included in your handouts, but I'll pull these up so we can take a look at them. This first one is labeled pricing breakdown. And these are both Excel sheets that you can kind of play around with. And again, if you wanted to meet with somebody here at the SBDC, we could help you with these. This one kind of goes through all of the components in pricing. And so in this sample, I've got someone that had like a handmade apparel item. And so it breaks the pricing down into the various pieces, that we just talked about. So the raw materials here, the cost of goods, is over here. And we had this person figure out, how much they put in material in each garment, how many meters of material, and how much was the cost per meter. The same thing with ribbons, buttons, interfacing, all of the pieces that go into this, right down to the thread. You'd see here the thread, if I use a full spool of thread on this one particular item, how much does that cost? These particular items had appliques applied to them, so how much were they paying for those? And then coming up with a total cost for raw materials. It would be calculated here. These are not set up to automatically calculate, but you could easily add that in, or we could help you add that in. And then labor is also included here. And so what we did was break down their labor into three different pieces. They had sewing labor, so it was just basic sewing. And they had applique labor, which was a little higher price because it had a little different skill set. And looking at, okay, for this particular piece of apparel, how many hours of sewing does it take on average? And how much, would that be worth per hour? And again, this is where if you're the sole producer, this is, how much you would be paid per hour to produce this particular item. So again, paying what you're worth here. And then we had some contracted labor. There were some items that she had contracted out where she would have people do some sewing for her and what she paid for that. Then we kind of just put a guide here of something general. I would say if you're using this for pricing, you would really want to kind of go through each product line individually, or each specific product in your line individually, to break that down. And then we figured overhead, and this is a little bit tricky to think about. In this example, I'll kind of show you how we broke it down. So travel was one piece of overhead that this person, would have an ongoing expense that they would need to make sure that they covered through their sales of their products. And so this person was doing the show circuit, and they went to some pretty big events. And this is quite old, but back then they were priced at $625 per event. She went to four per year. So that was, she knew she had to cover her costs of $2,500 a year, or $208 a month. And that's the cost that she needed to cover. Then we had utilities, $475 a month, insurance, $76 a month. There were some other things, but I just simplified the template here so you could kind of add your own things in. And so what we did was take a look at what was her average production rate. How many pieces of apparel did she typically produce in an average month? And for her, it was 40 a month. And so what we did was take that total overhead and then spread that out. How much per unit? So if her overhead, was $400, what was the overhead that would be applied to each piece of apparel that she produced, so that we knew that was the piece of that pricing component for that item. And so then we bring all the pieces together, what your cost of raw materials are, we add up your labor and your overhead. And so here's what happens is a lot of times people stop here. They say, okay, I paid for my materials, I paid for my labor, I paid for my overhead. This is what my price is. What this really is your break-even price. This shows that you've covered all your expenses, but what it leaves out is profit. So you want to make sure that you add that profit on there, because if you do this base price, this break-even price, sure, you're going to cover all your costs, you're going to be able to keep going, but you're not going to grow. You're not going to have money to reinvest, and you may not even have money, to kind of cover unexpected expenses that might come up, or changes in your business as they arise. So this is where that profit piece comes in. And so you'll see here that we don't really have any guides or any calculators here to help out with that. And again, that's something to talk, with a business advisor, somebody here at the SBEC, or your accountant, or someone at ANCA. Talk with somebody, or maybe multiple people, about what that profit level should be. And there's a lot of ways to do it, thinking about, maybe what your future goals are for the business. If you have an expansion in mind, what do you want to contribute toward those goals from your profit margin? So this is one of the tools that we have to help out, that you'll have in the handouts. And then the other one that we have here is a little bit more specific to wholesaling. And this one is pre-formatted, but it helps you to consider, what your price is and how that would equate to when it ends up on a retailer's shelf. So if you look at the example here, we have a product, you'd be able to fill in, maybe different product items here, item numbers, but we have a product here on the first line that costs us $7 to manufacture. Let's say it's a candle, because that's an easy thing for everybody to picture. Costs us $7 to make this candle. That includes, the wax, the wick, the jar that it's in, the labeling that goes on the front, all of the things that go into making that. So right off the bat, if we follow the keystone pricing, then we know that when it gets to the retailer, that price is going to double. Our wholesale price, is actually going to be $14. So there's these red columns here to figure in distributor price. I'm going to skip right over those because that's a whole other scenario, and I don't really know that it applies to most of you. So we're not going to worry about that right now, but know that it's here if you do get in that arena. So we have your gross profit margin here. If your product costs $7 to make, it's being sold at $14, then you've got $7 as your gross profit margin. So then over in this section of the spreadsheet, we'll show you what that price is going to look like when it gets to the retailer. So it kind of helps you to calculate. If the retailer tells you that they need a 20% margin, then you know that when they take your product, it's going to end up on their shelves at $17.50. That's 125% markup. Or if you know that the retailer is looking for a 30% margin, that product would be $20 on their shelf. That's 143% markup. If you know they need a 50% margin, which is this kind of where, typically a lot of retailers are going to be, 200% markup, then that's $28 on the shelf. And so this is just kind of a quick way for you to calculate. I know if it costs me, X amount of dollars to produce this, how does that translate into a retailer? And there's also a breakdown here of some of the common, pricing components and how to do some figuring back and forth. But it's a good tool to kind of get the thought process going. And again, if you need help with that, certainly come, to the SBDC. We're more than happy to do that for you. So I'm going to talk to you about a few different things that you kind of want to have in place on the business end to make sure that your wholesale experience goes smoothly, and especially at the show, that when you're dealing with retailers, that you're, you know, dealing with them in the way that they expect, and also, again, to make things easier on both ends for you, for them and for you. Make sure there's clear communication. Make sure that you're all agreeing to the same thing, so that you're able to kind of have a good experience. So the first thing you want to think about is setting out your wholesale terms and policies. And I would recommend that you develop this and have it in writing and have it be something that you're giving to everybody that you do wholesale business with. And so you need to make some decisions about how you're going to handle, certain situations. One of those things you want to think about is whether you're going to set a minimum order. It's not entirely necessary, but it may be a good idea for a couple of different reasons. Number one, if you've got a product that really kind of needs to be grouped in a particular way, or have, a nice volume or a nice collection to be able to be kind of be noticed on the shelf, which I think that's the case for a lot of products, then this might be something that's important. You don't want a retailer that comes through and makes a small purchase and then your product gets lost on their shelves. It discourages people that are coming in and just, doing one-off orders. Not that that's, a terrible thing, but, the whole point of doing this wholesale is to be able to make larger volume sales, for all the reasons that we discussed earlier. So, you don't really want to have to be dealing with individual orders, as a wholesaler. You can set a minimum order if you want to, in dollars or in item numbers. So it's really just whatever works for you or whatever's customary for your type of product. If you're not, really, comfortable with, or you don't think it's important for minimum orders, you might just think about maybe setting a minimum for the initial order from a particular retailer, and then maybe a smaller minimum, or maybe no minimum on subsequent orders. So that at least tells you that they're committed to your product for the long term, and that it's something that they're interested in. The other thing that you really want to think about including in your wholesale terms in policies is your payment expectations. It's best to have payment before you ship any orders, especially initial orders. You really don't want to get burned shipping out a big quantity of stuff and having to chase payment, or God forbid, not getting paid at all. You want to be clear in your policies of what types of payment are accepted. Are you going to accept credit cards? Do you accept cash? Do you accept checks? Do you use PayPal? whatever the case may be, what is it you're going to accept? If you really feel that you want to, bill customers or extend credit to customers, I would say wait at least until after the initial order to do that. At bare minimum, get prepayment on the first order, so you're dealing with someone who's on the up and up, and then you can offer net 30 after that first order. If you're going to do that, you definitely want to do a credit check. One of the handouts, I believe I included it today, is information about how to check a credit report for another business, some basic stuff like that. So, make sure that you have that in place before you extend credit to anyone, because you really want to make sure that you're making a safe bet. So we also want to think about addressing shipping in your terms and policies. Are you going to do flat rate shipping? Is it going to be determined by weight? Do you have a certain carrier that you're going to use? Are you going to allow the customers to choose a carrier? Whatever those cases may be, however you're going to treat shipping, decide what that is and have that spelled out in your terms and policies. Thinking about returns, how are you going to deal with those? Will you take returns of unsold merchandise? If so, is there going to be a time limit on that? Are you going to set, maybe, terms for the conditions? You don't want somebody, maybe necessarily returning damaged goods or something that's faded or expired. And how will you handle damage if something is damaged in shipping or if it gets damaged at the retailers? How are you going to address that? Again, just kind of trying to anticipate any of the situations that could possibly come up with an order or with your relationship with a wholesaler, to make sure that you address any of those issues before they become problems. Other things you may want to consider is maybe spelling out, what your policies are for order cancellation, if you'll allow it, within what time frame. If you have a display policy, a certain way things need to be displayed. If you have minimum retail pricing, you kind of have to be careful that you don't have retailers out there selling things for less than what you're selling at your retail. Are you going to offer volume discounts if they order a certain amount of stuff? So again, these are not things that will apply necessarily to everybody or things that you would necessarily have to do. And there's kind of a delicate balance between, developing these policies to protect you and to set up a good relationship with your wholesaler. And then, if you start to go overboard and put too many restrictions on, then you start kind of turning retailers away. So you have to kind of, be careful with that balance, but you do want to make sure that you're protecting yourself and setting out those terms and policies ahead of time. A few other things that you can use to help you manage wholesale: a line sheet. And I have some samples of that. Basically, a line sheet is kind of an abbreviated catalog, I guess is a good way to think of it. What it does is give some quick, easy information for wholesalers to see your product and what it is they're going to be looking at and what to think about. And so this is something that you would have at a wholesale show that you could give people that they could take with them if they don't place an order that day, or even if they do place an order that day, but they may have interest in some of your other products. You want to make sure, that you provide that information. And so what you would have in there would be your item numbers, SKU numbers, if you have those for your products, a title and description, some photos, making sure that they're really clear and good. All of the options that you have for your various products. So, if you sell baseball caps, what are the various sizes, the various colors, the various materials, being able to see all of the options. Your line sheet would include your pricing. You can include your wholesale and the MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail, if you want to include that. And also, it's a good idea to include those payment terms that we just talked about as part of your policies on your line sheet, so that's there for them to clearly see. The biggest thing is make sure that it's clean, it's organized, it's easy to read, it's something that they can access and get good information on, relatively easily. So you do have, as part of your handouts, some of those examples, and I'll pull some of those up. This is one of them. Again, You can see here they have their wholesale terms spelled out right up here at the top. Contact information is always important. You'd be surprised how many people forget that. But you can see here, this person sells t-shirts, various t-shirts. It tells you what the minimums are, what the recommended retail is, what the product ingredients or components are. There's an item number, what sizes they come in, what colors they come in. So all the basic pertinent information in one quick and easy place. So that's kind of a good example. Another one, for apparel, looking at, here's the basic item, here are the various colors that it comes in, again, the type of fabric, the sizes that it comes in, what your wholesale pricing is. This one does not include payment terms, but I like kind of the layout of it. Again, a soap vendor, so basic information. Their UPC is on this one. In this case, their wholesale price, minimum costs. So there's a few, samples that you can kind of go through. There's some here for jewelry, some for food products, depending on what your business is. You can take a look at the ones that are pertinent to you. Some other things that you're going to want to make sure that you've developed if you haven't already for your business. One of those is an order form. And these are things that you can just go, you can pull an invoice from, Microsoft, a template. QuickBooks has some good templates as well. You can develop something on your own. You can go to a printer and they can, help you develop them. But you want to have an order form, and especially when you're at a wholesale show. And Lauren has told me in the past that with this show, you are likely to get people who want to do cash and carry, so who will make a purchase the day of and take it with them, and also people that want to place an order. Every show you do is going to be different. Some of them may be more order than cash and carry, or vice versa. So that's one of the things you want to know going in, but you should always be prepared for orders, obviously. So on your order form, and there's a couple of samples in the handouts, and I'll pull those up. We can look at them real quick. On your order form, you want to make sure you have an order number or a purchase number. This will kind of help you track that order. If someone calls with a question about it, you can easily access it by the number. You'll have the business name on there and contact information too, but the more ways you have to track that particular order, the better off you're going to be. You may have a retailer that has 2 or 3 orders with you and they have a problem with one of them. You want to know which one it is, so you would get the order number. So assign an order number when you're developing these at the beginning. Start off with 0001 and go up from there. If you go to a printer and have them printed, it's a good idea to have the order forms in duplicate copies so you can provide one to the retailer while you're at the venue. But you want to have your order numbers on there, and printers can help you to put those on automatically. If you develop them in a program like QuickBooks, I think that generates the order numbers for you. Obviously, you want the buyer's name and contact information, get their shipping and their billing address, which could be different. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to that. Their payment information, so their credit card information if they're using credit card, whatever terms are you've agreed to if you're extending credit. The shipping date, you want to have on that order form when that product is approximately going to be shipped, or if you're able to put exact, that would be great too. And again, duplicate copies, so when the person leaves your booth, they're able to collect that as well. And then an invoice. You want to make sure that it has invoice on it so that people don't mistake it for an order form. You'd be surprised how many people do that. Again, all the pertinent contact information, spelling out your payment terms, when you send an invoice, and again, this would be if you're waiting, you're billing someone and waiting on payment, and you want to make sure you spell those terms out so they know this bill needs to be paid in the next 30 days, or we need cash on delivery, or whatever the terms may be. So that has to be put in there. So here's a sample invoice. Again, it's just a really simple sample that we pulled off of, Microsoft Word, a template that was out there. Your company information, your invoice number, billing and shipping information, if they're different, payment information, when's the payment due, if you have salespeople or you want to kind of record who made the sale, if you've got multiple people at a show, that would go here. Your payment terms, cash on delivery or 30 days net, whatever you decide. Estimated shipping and delivery date, your shipping method, products that they ordered, quantity, item number, description, unit price, if there's a discount and what their total is, all of the pertinent information, then your particular business information on here as well so they can contact you. Then for your sales order, again, just the basic information. If you pull these templates off, wherever, Microsoft or somewhere online, a lot of them are kind of fill in the blank like this. But all of your company information, remember to have your contact information in here as well. A lot of people forget that. I just flipped that. This is the sales order. This is the invoice. So this is what they get sent for payment. And then this is where you write down what they're ordering. And so what you might find is you might have this sales order that has maybe 4 items listed, and you end up shipping maybe 2 of those items and 2 others are still in production. So you want to make sure, this is where that order number comes in handy, that you want to make sure your order number is included on this invoice so that you know, to be able to cross-reference those. So it's all just, things you want to set up for tracking. And I'm just seeing here that we do have a few questions, and it looks like I missed before. Someone asked if there's a way for you to know which retailers are going to be registered for the show. And I believe, Lauren, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that is the case with this show. And Lauren does say, yes, she's going to send out the list of the registered buyers a week or so before the show, and then also afterwards, so you have that information. And those of you that have gone to the show before, obviously, will have some of that information from previous shows, so that's helpful as well. Stephanie is saying here that she's offering a suggestion of something that she's doing this year. I'm including on my order form a checkbox for how they would like to be contacted. I was surprised how many people prefer phone rather than email, but it ensures that I'll be able to reach them. I think that's a really good idea because you never know. A lot of people will put their email addresses on things and it's an email that they never ever check. So you want to make sure that you've got good contact information. So that's a good way to accomplish that. So that's a good suggestion. We do have one question, maybe Lauren, that you could kind of contribute to a little bit. But someone asks here, the majority of my items can be customizable by the location of the retailer. How significant is it to have or not have cash and carry inventory at the show?
That's a great question. I think just having example products in that case will work fine. The way that we advertise the show to retailers is that cash and carry is available at the vendor's discretion, meaning it's fully up to the vendors whether or not they want to do that. And with some products, it makes sense. And some people have the bandwidth to do that and some people don't. So either way is fine. But
Okay,
having some
great.
examples and making it clear that customization is available, I think would be your best bet in that case.
Yeah, and I think just because some retailers come and are prepared for cash and carry, it's not necessarily a requirement that you have that type of product. Am I right, Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good way to deal with that situation. So another thing I think that you might find helpful is developing a catalog. And this is something I think that is just, I don't think it's entirely necessary. It really depends on how large your product line is and what you're wanting to accomplish. But a catalog is nice sometimes because it can serve 2 purposes. It's more detailed than a line sheet. So you want to include more detailed descriptions in it, really, really good quality photos. I usually think of a magazine as something that's a little bit more, magazine quality, something that looks, like nice and glossy and really professional and really, with an advertising bent to it, as opposed to a line sheet that's almost more of kind of a checklist of here are the things we have, just the facts, ma'am. A good idea with your catalog, since usually they're pretty pricey to produce, even if you're not getting them printed, even if you do an online catalog, if you're paying someone to produce it and do good quality photos, you put some investment in it. If you include the prices in your catalog, then you have to change a price. That makes that catalog obsolete. So then you have to redo it or revise it. A good idea is to maybe, produce your catalog if it's going to be fairly standard, and then just have an attachment. If it's a printing catalog, a page that goes in that you can slide in with pricing on it, or a price list that you can provide in addition to the catalog. And then you can use that same catalog for retail and for wholesale if that's something you want to do. Another really important tool at your show or really anywhere that you're doing business is to have a good business card, really professional, well designed. Try to use a standardized size. I know myself, it drives me nuts when somebody has a card that's just a little bit bigger or has kind of a funky shape to it. I think people think that that makes them stand out, and it kind of does, but then it's also, kind of like a pain to carry around if I'm going to stick them in a wallet or stick them somewhere where I've got a bunch of them from a show. Sometimes it gets a little cumbersome. And while we're talking about things like catalogs and business cards and line sheets, just a quick side note on branding, because we could probably talk about that for a whole 2 hours. You really want to make sure that you think about your branding in general, but also, when you're wholesaling, because that's part of the impression that you're bringing to the retailers that are going to see you. So, make sure that you have your business name, figured out. A lot of businesses kind of struggle with that for a while. So, get that settled. Have a really professionally developed logo, something that's, representative of your business and also memorable. Think about having a consistent color scheme and a uniform recognizable look. If you look at any of the big brands, McDonald's is always the big example. The golden arches is unmistakable. Their colors are, that red and that kind of golden yellow color. So kind of have something like that that people kind of recognize as your image or your brand. And then that translates into, your business card and your catalog and then your website. You want to make sure that you have a good website. It's really essential, even if it's something that's very simple. And if you're going to do wholesaling, if you're going to jump into that forum, it's a good idea to have a wholesale page on your website, even if it's just a contact form or, an online information sheet that says contact us for wholesale pricing, or here are the things that we provide for wholesale, contact us for pricing, or maybe you have an online order form if you want to do something a little more sophisticated. But make sure that, that you address those things on your website and that you have a good website developed. And then I've provided here a few links to some sample catalogs to kind of give you an idea. Again, they're all, pretty professionally done. If you look at them, like this one, it's beautiful. It looks like a catalog, gorgeous photography, really nice design. So again, this is something you're investing quite a bit in. You want to make sure that it's something that's going to last you a while. You can see here she sells linen, so this business has all of their different colors listed here. You can see close-ups of the fabric, lots of detail. So that's the kind of stuff that's in a catalog, as opposed to a line sheet where it would be something, maybe more like just this page where it says, here are the materials that we cover, this is what we have. So it's a little beyond just the basic. So now we'll talk about kind of getting ready for the show specifically. A lot of what we've covered so far has been, thinking about wholesaling or, how you're going to venture into this and if you should venture into it. Once you've decided to do it and you've decided and you've signed up for the show or you're going to do another show, there's some things you want to do to kind of be ready for that, to put your best foot forward. So there's some things you want to think about before you get to the show, and things that you want to try to find out. Again, what kind of show is it? Is it typically orders? Is it cash and carry? Is it both? So, for the buyer days, we've talked about that. You'll want to know how much space you're going to have and what's provided. So the size of the booth, how much space there's going to be. Are they providing a table, tablecloths? Is there pipe and drape? Sometimes there's rules about what you can hang from pipe and drape and what you can't. If you're going to some of the bigger shows, sometimes you get hard walls. Are they providing chairs? Will you have electricity available? Will you have internet available? All of those types of things. The time frame, when can you set up? How early can you get there to set up? When can you tear down? And I know these are all details that are provided to you ahead of this particular show. And I would say with most shows, but if there's something that isn't included, certainly ask and see if you're able to get that information. Some ideas for things that you may want to make sure that you're bringing: product samples. If you're taking orders only, at least one item from your each item in your product line. If you're going to do cash and carry, then you want to have an ample inventory for that as well. I think it's a good idea to put together wholesale packets. So we talked about all of those different pieces that you need, your policies, your order forms, the line sheets. Sometimes it's a good idea to have those all in just like a little folder and have a collection of those so that when someone comes through, you have everything that you need, you can hand to them, and they have that all to do an order right then if they want to, and everything, all the information they need for that. But then also they can take that with them. Clipboards are a good idea. If you're going to be taking orders at the show, it makes it a heck of a lot easier for people to fill out forms. It helps you to kind of not have to take up a lot of table space for, those kind of administrative things, filling out forms and signing stuff and getting information. It's a good idea to have a form or some way to collect information from the people that come by your booth so that you can put them on your email list for future marketing. Make sure that you're telling them that's what you're doing so they don't get emails from you out of the blue and get upset about that. You can do it just, a little basket where you collect business cards if you want to do it that way. If you want to put a form out on the table where people can sign up, if you want it to be part of your order form, and they can check, yes, I want emails or no, I don't. However you decide to do it. But one of the good things about doing any show, but in a wholesale show also, is the opportunity for sales, obviously, but aside from that, the ability to gather that information and build that network so that even if you have a retailer that's come through, maybe they've already spent their budget for this season, but they really are interested in what you have, it allows you to contact them in the future. You can send them emails or follow up with them later on so you don't necessarily lose them as a potential customer. Any display tools, office supplies, just kind of random things that you might need, pins, hammer, screwdriver, tape, the old duct tape for everything. Pens and paper are a really good idea to have, copies of your order forms. Maybe some cleaning supplies sometimes. I've been to some shows where I've shown up and, tables aren't necessarily cleaned off. The guys are just kind of throwing them in there as they set up. Paper clips, any of those kind of random little things. And then obviously the stuff you want for your booth design, tablecloths, display fixtures, any of your signage, all of that stuff. I've got a few clients that have a packing list for shows, a standard packing list, and they use it as a checklist before they go. I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And then, any extra things that they may need at a particular show if there's something special that they need. But that helps you to kind of keep things organized and to make sure that you're not forgetting things. I also have a couple of clients that kind of keep a bug out bag for their shows where they've got everything, maybe not a bag, but probably like a tote bin or something. This is all my stuff for my shows and it's all in there. They get back from a show, they restock it for the next one and they're ready to go. So, there's some things you can do to kind of make that process a little bit more manageable if you're doing a lot of shows. And then while you're at the show, you want to make sure that you're presenting your best and making the best contacts there. So three big things to remember, I think, when you're at the show. And if you've done, shows as a retailer, a lot of these things are kind of the same and you'll kind of be old hat at this part of it, probably. But if not, if this is new to you, here are some things to keep in mind. Staff your booth, be approachable and be knowledgeable. This is all about presence and the ability to talk to people and share information to convince them that they're interested in what you have to offer. So the toughest one probably is staffing your booth. If you're a one person show, it's hard to be at your booth, 24/7 or, whatever the hours are, being there a whole time. Obviously you do need bathroom breaks. You do need to eat once in a while, maybe. So do your best to be at the booth as much as possible. Sometimes it helps if, you have the ability to bring someone with you, a friend or a family member, somebody that can kind of step in for you or help tag team a little bit. If you have an employee, it may be worth the investment of bringing them along so you have, some extra hands. Be approachable, don't be that person that's kind of sitting in the corner of the booth on their phone or their tablet or reading a book. Even if you don't have anyone at your booth at that particular moment, you do kind of want to be watching for people as they're passing, making eye contact, trying to draw people in as much as you can. The best thing to do is stand if at all possible, or use a stool that's kind of elevated, a higher stool, so you kind of have eye contact with people as they come by. I've seen a lot of people with kind of those fold up lawn chairs shoved in the back of their booth and you're kind of slouched down in the back. You kind of want to have a more forward presence than that. A big one that I'm always guilty of is crossing your arms. I mean, it's really kind of a comfortable way to stand, so I understand, but also it kind of gives off the vibe of, don't come to me, kind of put you closed off. So try not to do that. But just the basic, greet people as they walk by, even if they aren't stopping, smile, be positive, strike up a conversation if you're comfortable doing that. And then also very important is to be knowledgeable. Be able to talk to people about your product, what goes into it, what methods you used, how you got into this business, all of that personal information that helps a retailer kind of connect with you and connect with your product, and getting them to start thinking, yeah, this is really something that I need to bring to my customers. When you're interacting with the buyers, try to be as clear and to the point as you can. Obviously, you want to have a nice conversation, but you also don't want to waste a lot of time. So, try not to get too far off topic. Two really good tools for that are an elevator pitch and a features and benefits analysis. Elevator pitch is basically, kind of picturing if you step into an elevator with someone and they ask you, what is it that you do? Or they ask you, what is your business? Or what product do you sell? Thinking about, giving them a response and the amount of time it takes to go from one floor to the next in an elevator. So a compressed amount of time. I'm sure we've all talked to people where we said, "Oh, what is it that you do, or what is your business?" And 15 minutes later, they're still talking, and you still don't really know what they do. You don't want to be that person. You want to be able to give concise information, and this is something you can practice. That you can put together to kind of almost have it as a practiced pitch of, this is what I do, this is what's special about it. Features and benefits is basically just looking at specific physical features about your product. So things like what are the ingredients or what are the materials that go into it. And then benefits are, kind of those emotional aspects of your product. How does this help your customer in terms of making their life better or making them happier or making them feel good? So thinking about what it is that will actually sell the product to the person, what is their emotional attachment to it. Also, knowing your pricing and your payment terms and your turnaround time. These are questions that retailers might ask, and you want to be able to answer those things, as quickly as possible. If those are important to them, that's why they're asking. Again, these are all things you can practice with some role playing. Get someone in your family or a friend or someone else that's going to the show, and have them pretend to be a buyer. Or maybe, you have some retailers that you already know, maybe they'd be willing to give you that kind of feedback. But just kind of being prepared to answer the kinds of questions that retailers are going to have. Again, having information and materials ready to go, having those order packets, ready, having clipboards, and again, thinking about not placing too many requirements on your orders. And most of all, as you're making these interactions with the buyers, collecting leads for follow-up, getting as much information as you can so that you can follow up with people afterwards you know, if they didn't buy but they have interest, following up with people who did place orders or buy, so you just have that ongoing contact. You don't want this to be a one-time contact. You want this to be something that's ongoing so that this becomes a long-term customer. And of course, being ready for order. So I mentioned already, clipboards, duplicate copies of your order forms, pens. One thing we didn't talk about a lot, but is also important when you're kind of going to these shows, is thinking about shipping and what your ship dates would be. Know how long your production process takes, and be mindful of that as you're taking orders. So if something takes you 3 weeks to produce, in 3 weeks I can produce 200 of these. If you get your first 200 orders and your next order comes in for another 50, and you tell them that you can also ship that in 3 weeks, you might be in trouble. So you want to make sure that you spread your orders out if you're able to do that, so that you're able to meet production deadlines. Sometimes it's helpful to have a calendar and say, okay, here's what I'm going to schedule for the first 3 weeks, and when you get to that amount of orders, you move it ahead. In your conversation with the retailers, you can find out, when do you need this product by? Is there a certain date that you have to have it by? What are your preferences? And see how you can work with them. The one thing you don't want to do is promise them to have an order in 2 weeks and not be able to do that. So you want to start that relationship off by being able to fulfill your first order on time, and setting it off with a good experience. First time orders, either get payment up front, get payment at the show, or get their payment information and process it when you ship. Don't ship an order without payment, unless you've decided to, you know, bill customers and give them net 30. And if that's the case, you want to be doing credit checks, which that's a whole other webinar as well. But really think that through. One thing to remember too is that if you are taking payment information, if you're having people give you credit card information at the show, don't leave that, sitting at the show overnight. Keep it with you, keep it locked in somewhere safe. That could be a really big problem for you at some point down the road. So make sure that you're doing that and that you don't forget, that safety measure. We've been to the show, we've made all these great sales, and you come away and you're on this really great high, and you look at all these orders I have, and you're ready to get to work. So here are some things to be thinking about, in those days and weeks following the show. Being really certain that you're honoring your ship dates. If an issue does come up, make sure you're upfront with the retailer and contact them. When you're getting ready to send things out, be sure to label all of the items that you ship out with item numbers. The easiest way to do this is if you can include it on the packaging in some way, so that all of your items have an item number on them. Again, it's just for easier tracking. If a customer has a problem with an order, they can call you and say, this is order number, item number XYZ, whatever it is. You can look it up really quickly. It helps you with managing inventory. Include a packing list in the box when you ship an order. So, maybe someone has ordered 100 items and you're shipping 50 in the first shipment. That packing list will indicate 50 of 100 so that they know on their end this is the first half of their order, and also so that you know on your end how much you've shipped because you're keeping a copy of that as well. It's a good idea to send your invoice separately of the package that you're shipping the product in for a couple of reasons. Number one is, it may not necessarily be the person who made the order who opens the box when it arrives at the retailers. It could be an employee that just kind of tears through everything and dumps all the packaging in the dumpster and puts the stuff on the shelf, and the invoice gets thrown in the trash. Or even owners, sometimes if it gets lost in the packaging, you may not see it there. So always send the invoice separately. It's a good idea. It helps everybody on both ends. You also want to make sure that after the show you follow up on leads as much as possible, and try to personalize it if you're able to. I always think it's a good idea to keep some notes if you're collecting business cards or on a data sheet. Sally from XYZ store was interested in more, Christmas decorations or whatever, so that when you have the product that they're looking for available, you can send a quick email or give them a call and say, hey, we met at the show and I know you were looking for XYZ. I happen to have that now. Would you like a sample, or could I send you a line sheet? So you're able to do that follow up. You may want to do a post-show special that encourages ordering afterward. You have to be careful of this. You don't want to offer a big incentive for people to order afterward who didn't order at the show, and then people that order at the show get mad at you. But within reason, think of something, maybe a free shipping offer or a small discount, or maybe they get a free display fixture, or just something to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit. Add your contacts to your mailing list, your email list. Again, if they've given you permission, as long as they know that that's what they've given you the information for, because you can use that to invite them to future shows that you're going to be at. You can send them seasonal specials. If you've got new products, you can send them an email, or a mailer announcing that, so that they know, what you have going on in your business and can keep abreast of everything. One thing with any of these follow-ups is make sure that people have a way to opt out. Give them an unsubscribe button, give them a way to contact you if they don't want to be contacted again, if they don't want to get your mailers, if they don't want your email, any of those things, make sure that they're able to get out of it. And so that wraps it up. Here's the contact information for our SBDC offices, ours here in Canton, and then also the SUNY Canton SBDC in Plattsburgh that's located at Clinton Community College. Angela Smith is a contact person there, but you can talk to anybody at either office. Really, we can all help you with just about anything you need. Remember that we do have the handouts here tonight. If you want to take a quick minute and download those before you log out, you can do that now. I will attach them to a follow-up email in the next day or two, so you will have those that way as well. But sometimes it's easier to access them really quickly this way. Also, we'll have a recording of this webinar. That'll take a week or two, so be expecting a link to that in your email in the next week or so. Also, I want to let you know that you'll be getting a survey when we close out of the webinar. It should pop up automatically. Please take a couple minutes to fill that out. I'd really appreciate it. We collect feedback on all of our webinars, all of our events that hopefully help us to, improve them over time. It helps us to know if there are other, topics or other things that you're interested in. So that gives us, feedback in that way. And then also, I would just like to remind you about our other upcoming workshop, February 13th, building a better booth. And again, I'll include that information in the follow-up email as well for you. And also, too, I would remind you, to contact any of our offices. You can contact Lauren at Anka. Sorry, Lauren, I should have put your contact information here, but I'm assuming probably most of the people logged on here know you. If not, you can contact us and we'll certainly put you in touch with Lauren. But make sure that you contact any of us if you have any questions. We're here to make sure that your experience with the buyer days is a good one and that it's successful and that you're making the best decisions that could work out the best for your business in the long run. So I want to thank everybody for listening, and hopefully I didn't miss any questions, but if I did, feel free to shoot them at me in a personal email. And thank you very much and have a good evening.